Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 844. I start off with knight f3, the Reti opening. My opponent goes c5. d5 or knight f6 are the most common moves, but this is quite reasonable too, and then it transposes into something like an English. I could actually still play e4 at this point, and we would have a perfectly ordinary Sicilian too. So it's a transposition trick you can use, I suppose. But anyway, I was going for this Reti setup, so I continue with c4. Let's see, he goes knight f6. So we have some usual moves. I go g3. I want the fianchettoed bishop. And then normally black would go with b6 here, set up a counter fianchetto. And it makes a lot of sense, kind of neutralizing the power of this bishop that I'm going to put on g2 in advance. But he went with d6. And after a few moves, we get to a position which could come from a symmetrical English. For example, right here, if he were to play the move g6, you can see the number of games jumps up at that point. We're into what looks like a symmetrical English. But he went with a6. And we stay in somewhat unique territory here. I could play with d4. Cancel that. I could play with d4 here. You can see that's the only move in the opening book at this point, but I was going for a more restrained setup. d4 is probably the more accurate move there, really. But anyway, I'm going for this kind of closed position, and we're just out of the opening book here. So he continued, or yes, I went d3. He went bishop to d7, castle, e6. So both of us are playing very restrained setups. And then I continued here with a3. You know, I'm just trying to enhance the power of this bishop by pushing these pawns forward on the queen side and trying to open things up over there. The chess engine points out an interesting alternative here, which is to play with b3, and then after a normal developing move, go bishop b2, and just have the double fianchetto, which it looks like a pretty good setup in this position. Anyway, I chose the other plan of trying to expand on the queen side. I went bishop b7, rook b8. I need the rook here before I can get in that b4 move. I went with b6, so he's defending that c-pawn in advance, and I went ahead and pushed on. And now he played the move knight to g4, which seems to be a little bit mistimed. The chess engine thinks that black should just castle here, and black is fine in this position. So knight g4, well, it gives a funny kind of line here after knight g4. So there is this diagonal, and something that I should have been paying a little more attention to during the game. And so I could play a move like knight d2, and this comes with a threat. This knight is sort of pinned there, and I'm threatening to push this pawn forward and just win a piece or win the exchange. So that provokes a response, rook a7. So knight d2, you know, although it looks like a retreating move, it's actually a forcing move. And then e3. It's not clear why the chess engine is playing this way. Maybe it's taking the square away from the knight and just controlling more of these. And then I assume the idea with black's maneuver is to get this knight to e5. And then after this exchange, queen goes to c2. And the chess engine just thinks this position is good for white. I mean, black is going to castle here. Maybe my pieces are more active, and of course I can move this knight out of the way and push pawns forward in the center. Yeah, it's not entirely clear to me why the chess engine likes that so much for white, but it thinks that's a pretty good position. And I think, well, the idea I guess I want to show you is that you can use a move like knight d2 as a forcing move to help get some other moves in. So I got in moves like e3 and the exchange on c5. Anyway, I played with b5 immediately, just forcing things over here on the queen side. He took, and I took back with the pawn, and then the knight has to move, and the knight went to a5. And after this, there's two moves here where I have the opportunity to move this knight with a discovered attack on his rook. But it turns out, I looked at this, there's just no good discovery here, nothing I can really gain. If I put my knight on a square where it can be taken, then well, that he can just take the knight if I put it here or here. Let me put it that way. Then he can just take the knight. I take the rook, and he takes my bishop. So it's 2 pieces for the rook, and that's good for black. You know, I could consider putting the knight here or here. It's protected, so he probably won't take it. Probably move the rook. But in both cases, rook to a7 seems to be a decent answer, and my knight hasn't necessarily improved. So it just turns out I don't have any good discovered attacks with the knight. Maybe even knight g5 I could consider, but because it is protected by the bishop there. But it doesn't seem to accomplish anything. Anyway, he played. Oh yeah, it's my turn. I played h3, and I just kicked his knight away. He went back to f6. Once again, I could consider various knight moves, but they don't seem to lead to much. So I went with the a4, just shoring up the pawn over here. Wasn't sure I wanted my bishop tied up defending that pawn all the time. The chess engine, though, would play e4, and I think e4 is a good move in this position. It plays e4 with the idea of pushing on to e5 and just disrupting the center while black's king is still in the center. Black really has taken his time with the castling. So anyway, I pushed on with a4. He went rook b8, getting the rook off the diagonal. I went bishop g5. And you know, I was thinking that I would trade this dark squared bishop off for this one, which is a pretty good piece for him, and just leave me with this light squared bishop, which looks better than black's light squared bishop. But he ignored that. Well, he played knight b7. He started bringing this knight back into the game, which makes sense. Let's see, I went queen b3. I had some ideas of bringing my queen into the game via a maneuver like that, but it didn't work out. And the problem is at any time black can play d5 and take that square away from me. So I guess it just doesn't work. But he played h6 first, kicking the bishop, and I retreated the bishop. Let's see, he went castles now, and I went g4. So now that he's castled, I was thinking, well, I still would like to get my bishop out here, and maybe I can push on to g5 and get that square for my bishop. And he played e4 at this point, so that squashes the idea of my queen coming over. Let's see. Hang on a second. Oh, he played queen c7. He hasn't played d5 yet. Yeah, d5 maybe was a good move there. And I went on with g5. And then he played knight h5. So knight h5 seems to be a bit of a mistake. Or at least the chess engine likes black better after this exchange. So if he just goes ahead and takes that pawn, sort of falls into my plan, and then, well, plays knight a5, bringing the knight back, but kicking my queen. And the queen, notice with the knight a5, the queen can't go to this square, so the queen has to retreat. And then queen d8, defending his bishop and maybe preparing to, well, it unpins the knight, so now the knight can move. And the chess engine likes black here, so it seems like that is a fine way to play. So he didn't really need to avoid this this idea I had of bringing my bishop to the square. He could have countered it just by letting me bring my bishop out. So this, at least temporarily, gains me a pawn, and he can't take back because of bishop takes. But he had a pretty clever idea here. He just plays g6, it defends the knight, and then he's going to round this pawn up at some later time, and it's not so easy for me to defend. Once again, the chess engine is saying, and now is the time to push on with e4. So, but I went with bishop g5. That was kind of my idea, was to get the bishop on this square and trade off his dark squared bishop. But it turns out f6 is actually quite a good move. I thought this looked strange during the game, this array of pawns on the third rank here, all those pieces behind them. It is kind of funny looking, but the chess engine rated that as one of the top choices. Well, yeah, I think it gave f6 as its first choice and thinks black is doing fine here once again. So anyway, I had to retreat my bishop, and now he plays d5 and takes this path away from my queen. So he's gained, he's kind of crept forward with his pawns and gained space, and his pieces seem pretty comfortable here behind the pawns. So black is doing okay at this point. And the chess engine thinks I should counter with e3 and just play a similar kind of waiting game. We have this sort of no man's land here on the fourth rank, and we'll be maneuvering our pieces. This is kind of trench warfare. We'll be maneuvering our pieces around these lines of pawns. Anyway, I didn't play that way. I played with knight to h4. I just spotted this weakness here, and I just wanted to see how he's going to defend it. King h7, that was a reasonable defense. And now I pushed on with e4. I'm trying to bust up his pawn formation a little bit. And he pushed on with d4. He could have tried f5 here. This is a pretty interesting move. It comes with a tempo on my knight. And if I retreat my knight, then he can grab a pawn here. And I thought this wouldn't be too bad because I thought he would keep taking, and I could take back with a knight, and then he'd have this isolated pawn I could play against. But the chess engine points out he doesn't have to keep taking. He can push here. and so this is pretty strong. He's really starting to push my pieces back. And he's got these two protected passed pawns for the endgame. So this is actually quite good for black. So after f5, the chess engine thinks the best move here is not to save the knight, but to sacrifice it by playing, oh, not that way, playing e takes d5. So he grabs the knight, and then I can grab on e6. So I get a couple of pawns, and I get this strong pawn in the center here. He can't take it back because it's protected at the moment as compensation for being down a piece. But, well, black is better in either case. Black is somewhat better. So that was, well, the chess engine didn't rate that as a mistake because it thought that black was better after the immediate d4 too. But, well, this seems to leave me in the game. And it seems like bishop to d6 is where he kind of lets me back in the game. Once again, this f5 move is a strong move for black. So bishop d6 sort of lets me off the hook, and I'm back in the game here. So I play f4 to shut down his bishop on this diagonal. Let's see, he went knight d8. I have to say this was really a fiercely complicated game, so really hard to play correctly. And the chess engine is liking white around here, but didn't especially care for my queen d1 move. I like the idea of rook f2, maybe with bringing a rook over. Or, but there's another idea here that I missed, which is a tactical idea, which is e5. And the point is, after the after this exchange, the rook is hanging. If he takes the pawn, the rook is hanging. So he has to, well, he could exchange rooks first, and maybe then grab the pawn. But then that's leaving his king side open. Notice that this rook is not defended in the back rank, and this knight is interfering with the other rook coming over. So that leads to actually a good position for white. So bishop e7 needs to be played, and then, well, the attack continues, but it seems like this is a pretty decent position for white. Queen d1, I think we're in the range of about even once again. Let's see, he drops his bishop back to e7. And I went with knight f3. Right here, the chess engine is already wanting to sacrifice to open up these lines. Say knight takes g6, king takes g6, bring the other knight in, knight to g3. I think the idea is you want to strike, taking advantage of this point in time when this knight has been placed on the back rank and has blocked this rook from getting in. So that probably should have triggered this thought of you know, why not sacrifice and try and open up the king side? And then when he takes this knight, come in here with the check. You don't and get the knight back that way. King to f7, and queen takes g3. So you sacrificed one knight. You traded another knight just to get rid of a defender on the king. So black is still a piece up. But you have these pawns over here on the king side. You have bishops ready to jump in and rooks ready to jump in, and it rates this as a oh well, a +2, +1 or +2 advantage for white. So it's probably a pretty strong attack considering that you're down material. Not easy to play necessarily. I'm not saying it's obvious that there's a win here, but well, there is an immediate threat of the queen coming in here like this, and then yeah, if you can maneuver the light squared bishop around, yeah, it's pretty dangerous. Anyway, let's see. I just retreated my knight here. I was getting away from this f5 idea with the tempo on my knight. He maneuvered his knight to f7, so a lot of these sacrificial ideas have gone away at this point. And I'm maneuvering my queen over to the king side here. Let's see. He took on h6, so he gathered the pawn back, so we're back to material equality. And I pushed on with e5, which I was really expecting him to take, so I could open up some lines here. But he played a good move here, knight f5, just stopping my other pawns from coming forward. And also, you know, he's looking at this g3 square, which is kind of annoying. Both knights are coordinated there. So so I played this move knight h4 to force some trades. He took, and I took back with the queen. He did not have to take. He could have played f takes e5. This looks like a pretty good move for black. I would probably take his knight. That gave me an escape route from the discovered attack from his bishop. And my knight was actually defended by the queen too, but I would probably have taken. Let's see, and then he can take with the rook, and I can take, and he can take, and I can take, and well, this is still a game. Let's see, what's the material count? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so the material is actually even, and his king looks a little exposed, but his back rank is open, so now he can bring his rook over, and so I think this is an okay position. I think the chess engine preferred black in that position, but in any case, let's see, he took here. I took back with the queen, and then let's see, yeah, f takes e5. This was the game-losing move. He just didn't realize that this bishop was undefended back here, which is an easy kind of mistake to make. Your pieces have been sitting back in your own camp, and they're normally protected there, and in any case, they've been shielded by the pawns all this time, so you get to thinking of them as fairly safe, but they're actually, this piece is not defended. It is actually just a loose piece there. So bishop to c8 is given as a move here. Another possibility that he could have played was rook b to e8, which, you know, defends that pawn. Well, bishop to c8 also defends the bishop, but rook b to e8 seemed to make more sense to me to defend the bishop with the rook. But then I can push on with f5. So this is still a completely unclear position. Let's see. If he takes this way, then there was a problem with this one. Maybe because I can push on like that. But anyway, the chess engine was recommending taking the other way. E takes f5. And I could push on with e6. So this is a double pawn sacrifice. And then knight to f4. And the chess engine rates this as slightly better for white, even though I've sacrificed 2 pawns. But, well, I am hitting the bishop. I'm hitting the knight. This knight is pinned. My other pieces can jump in pretty quickly. So anyway, interesting position, but not necessarily winning. It's just gives some edge to white, but the game would have continued. But after f takes e5, it is just all over. And fortunately, I didn't run away with my queen, but I noticed his bishop was unprotected and took it. So he tried a few things here. Let's see, he went knight to g7, well, defending against the check. And I came back here, went king to g8, and then I took the pawn. And he went knight to f5, shutting down this diagonal, or this row, shutting down that file, so I can't do more trades and hitting my queen. So the queen came to g5, looking at the g-pawn here. He defended with king g7 and knight f4. So I think these moves are pretty straightforward. I'm just piling up on his weaknesses here. Let's see, went knight back to e7 to defend. Went bishop to e4, continuing to pile up. I didn't notice he actually made the same mistake once again. The knight is not defended on e7, so knight e7 was another mistake. But this is also a winning move. Well, I'm a piece up, so most things win. let's see, he went bishop to e8, so defending his knight and defending the pawn. And I went knight takes e6 check, which I saw was this fork of king and queen. Oh, let's see, we lost the game there. Here, let's restore the game. So here we were. Yeah, he just played bishop to e8, and I played this move knight takes e6 check, which is forking the king and the queen. So it's pretty natural. And he went king to g8, and I went ahead and took the queen. But in fact, there's a mate in 2, which I could have played here. There's rook takes f8 check, defended by the knight. The king only has 1 square to go to. And then queen here is mate. So that would have been the fastest end, but taking the queen off is probably a pretty decent move too. Anyway, he went knight f5, and I just kept taking things because I had noticed that there was a pin here, and at this point he decided to resign. So anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Bye.